Hello, and welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for spinning that dial in my direction and finding me among the many YouTube channels, including a lot that focus on fountain pens, as I do. So it's going to be a vintage focus in this video. These are two pens that I've had in my collection for decades. I picked them up during my heyday of going to flea markets and street fairs and antique shops and traveling around the country and the world and always finding time to look for pens. So what intrigued me about these pens is, number one, it's an interesting celluloid. And they are Watermans, but they're not exactly the same model. So the resin looks the same, but as you can see, the top of the cap finial is different. This has a clip, but it's loose. We'll work on seeing what we want to do to fix it. This clip is missing, but it was a riveted clip. The lever is two different designs, a spoon lever here, which is the earlier design, and this is the spade, which came out a little bit later, probably in the late 20s, and this one was around since they first started putting the box lever into their pens. Different cap bands. One has initials on it, JLS, and the other one just has a nice line design. If we look at the bottom of the barrels, which is where you look for on Waterman pens, especially vintage pens like these, to see the actual number of the pen that's engraved there. And then we'll see another little difference. One's a 994 and the other is just a 94. I don't know the significance of the three digits 994. I mean, the 9 means it's made out of some type of plastic. The 4 is the size of the nib. So the 94 on both of those I have a way of understanding, but not this third 9 or the third character, which is a 9. The other difference between these two pens, if you look at the 994, the nib is the right nib on the 94. It's a number 4 nib, a nice good size nib. The one on the other pen looks like a number 2 nib. It has that spoon feed. And this section appears to have some color in it. And this is definitely also has some color in it. So we're going to have to clean up these pens, both of them. And I'm obviously going to restore the 94 one. But I just wanted to show the pens together. So this design and size is reminiscent of the number 7 pen, which I did a review on. You can see it has a similar type of tiered finial at the top of the cap. Plain cap band, but different size. Spade feed, and of course the number 7 at the end of the barrel, which is nice. And it's a, I think it's a blue. Yes, it's a blue. Sometimes I call it purple, but it's a blue. As when they color coded your nibs. And the other pen that resembles these are two 92s, so it's the 2 nib. And 9, obviously, they're made out of some type of resin. And I got a bad lining those up, but hopefully you can see them there. And these also have two different clips. One's riveted and one's just pressed in. Similar caps and also the same type of band. I did a review on these, so we'll link those in the descriptions. I was very happy to acquire these, one in a pen show and one from eBay. So we're going to go off camera and do some cleanup work here. And I took the pressure bar out and it's fairly corroded, so we're going to polish it up and wax it. I'm going to use my knockout block to take out that feed, because I'm not happy with the way that nib is adjusted on the feed. I like to have the end of the feed closer to the end of the nib. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to try a little bit of a trick, which I think someone else has already tried, to secure that clip to the cap. So we'll be back in a bit. There's not a lot of information to be found on the 94 model. There's a few around. I found some in mahogany, and they could sell for anywhere from a few $100s to over $1,000. There's a lot of differences. There seems to be a number of 94s that are made out of hard rubber, which doesn't make sense because it should be a 54, but I think during the late 20s and the 30s and the 40s, Watermans went through a lot of transitions. They moved away from hard rubber into plastic, celluloids, and the model numbers may not have been consistently kept up. I found pictures of both of these pens in the Waterman book that I have, and here's what they look like. And you can see the cap bands are the same, the top of the cap finials the same, so they share a lot, and also the different types of levers in the barrel. So again, interesting pen. I want to get one of these in working order. I have high hopes on this number 4 nib. Writing well. We're going to do my little test, and you can see it opens up pretty nicely. Let's see how it works with ink after I do my restoration. This is stage 2 on reassembling the barrel. So this is my knockout block. Bought it from Pandemonium. You could build your own. So you just put this over one of the holes in a knockout block, find a suitable metal rod, and just tap out the feed and the nib. Both of these cleaned up very well. I mean, I just am blown away with Waterman feeds because they work so well and they're so simple in design. I'll polish the back of that. And the nib came out nice. So when I put them back together, I'll just reposition the nib and the feed to what I like. I don't usually make things look perfect. I just want to make certain that the surface, which is going to be up against the sack, is nice and clean, and I waxed it. If you look at the lever, you'll see there's that little tab there. So you'll slide it in to the barrel this way, and there's little feet at the bottom of the lever which you guide into here. They slip by because that little tab will bend down, and then it snaps back, and then this keeps the lever in place, and then we can put in the bladder, which I'll cut the size to number 17. So I'll probably cut it about there, which will give me a nice amount of ink in there. Let me do that off camera. I'm happy with how the feed and nib are now positioned. I think that's the proper position for the feed and nib, and you can see the feed extends all the way back to the end of this section. I cleaned up this end here where the sack is going to go, and I'll put my little bit of wood glue there, put the sack on, and then shellac on the outside of the sack, and I find that to work very, very well. Stage 3 coming up. Well, we're all ready for the all-important insertion of the new sack. So between the sack and the nipple on the section is a little bit of water-based wood glue. I just think it makes a nice seal between the rubber and the plastic, and it doesn't damage anything, and it's very easy to remove the sack if you need to replace it. And then I put a light coating of shellac right at the base of the sack, and I think that gives it some stability. Also seals if there could be any air leaks between the sack and the section. So I do this. Some people use shellac to attach the sack, and I do not favor that, because when I'm taking vintage pens apart, sometimes removing that calcified shellac and sack from the section is a laborious task. I think the nib came out well. So before we assemble it, we're going to talc the sack. This is some just basic talc that I have. The pressure bar fit in very well. I'm very happy with that. And we've polished up the pen, and I think it really makes that celluloid look nice. It's not going to be looking like new, but then it's a vintage pen, so that's what we expect. I think it's always funny if people do not want to have any imperfections in their pen, then I sincerely suggest they stay away from vintage. So as usual, I insert, and you can feel a little bit of resistance, so that's why I think it's a good fit for the sack. And I keep the lever aligned with the nib. The challenges with restoring vintage. I had clues that this was cast off from someone else's collection that I probably bought in a flea market. One of the reasons why I stopped going to flea markets was because the majority of the vintage pens were cast-offs and had issues which you may not be able to find in a flea market. So the issue was the pressure bar in here was too long. And when I tried to put the section in, it hung up on the pressure bar. I thought maybe the pressure bar wasn't seating all the way. The two little feet on this lever are not perfect, but they did engage the pressure bar the way they're supposed to. But now it's all put together, and I'm very happy with it from a visual viewpoint. Structurally, it leaves a little bit to be desired. The cap goes on with less than a turn, so there's probably some threads missing, but it's good enough to secure the cap. And if we compare the polished version with the unpolished version, it just pops. You get to see more contrast. Those creamy colors are just a little bit lighter. So visually, I'm happy with how the pen came out. So now we have to figure out what kind of ink we're going to put in here and see how that nib is going to write. So I had mentioned that Waterman also made a 94 in hard rubber, and here's an excellent version of it, and we'll see if we can focus on that number engraved at the back of the barrel. Yes, it's a 94. And just to put things in perspective, this is a 52 and this is a 55. So these two 94s are pretty much the same size, lengthwise, girthwise, and everything else. You know, there's that spoon lever versus the spade lever, a different clip, and also a plastic pen versus three versions of hard rubber in ripple. And as you can see, there's a lot of variations in the ripple. So here they are posted. They are all long pens posted. They don't post that deep, and they don't post real secure, but they are postable. And with those nice cap bands on it, hopefully the posting will not damage this hard rubber, which is close to 100 years old in some of these pens. Let's see close-ups of those nibs. So we have two number 4 nibs here at the left side, a number 2 nib, and a number 5 nib. Not a significant amount of difference. The number 2 nib is definitely smaller, but mostly in width. Length is about the same. They all have a nice harp-shaped breather hole, nice Waterman engravings, and the number of the nib is at the bottom. The sections are very similarly shaped, just a little bit bigger as the nib gets bigger. So you may ask about, I see Waterman pens sometimes as a V. Here's a 52V here. Here's a regular 52, and here's that 94, which is the subject of this video. There's a significant difference in length between the V and the non-V pen. The girth is the same, and you may ask, there's also a 52.5, which is slightly thinner. Not significant, but a little bit. So it's even smaller than the 52V, and that's V, my understanding, stands for vest pocket. So if you had a short pocket, you could put it into your pocket. It wouldn't stick up that high because the length is much shorter. Same number 2 nib as the 52. Darken the room. Time to bring in the LED light and play it on this very interesting resin, celluloid, however you want to call it. I think Waterman did a great job with this. You know, a kind of different look for them. You know, that tiered top of the cap looks very nice. And the resin has some transparency to it. We'll take a look inside the cap. You'll see there's a lot of threads there to screw the cap on to the barrel. Here's my LED strobes. You can see some dried ink in there, which I could get out with some water and a brush. If we look inside, we'll see a nice cap liner in there, and that probably could have been pulled out and I could have permanently fixed the clip, but not something I'm going to do right now, nor am I comfortable with. I like it the way it is right now. It's a writer, not a collector. So I thought this ink would go well with the mahogany grained pen. So filling a sack filler, you have to put the nib and section in ink as you normally would. Push the lever up, see bubbles, back down, it draws up ink. And as usual, I do this 3 times. It's to make certain everything is saturated and flushed well. And one thing about the pen is that lever snaps in place very nicely, stays in place, is not loose. Let the excess ink come off of the nib into the bottle. And we're going to see how it writes. Here's the color card for the Desert Varnish. I don't even know what to call that color. There's some red in it. It's definitely kind of on the brown side, but it's a unique color. Let's see how it works in the pen. So occasionally you'll see people really express a tremendous desire for a vintage flex nib. And I always take it with a grain of salt if they're actually reacting to an experience that they have or something that they expect. And I've spent 50-some years with vintage flex, and it's a unique animal. Not for every person. This pen fits fine in the hand unposted. A little short, it's a little light. We'll give you the lengths. As we talked about, it does post, but not very deep. Makes for a long pen, and you do feel the weight of that cap. So it does back weight it slightly. And it doesn't feel that secure. This is a standard vintage section. Fairly large concave design. On the short side, nice flare out at the end, so you know exactly how close you are to the nib when you're holding it. Those threads aren't sharp and there's no step up, so you can kind of hold it anywhere. But the further up you hold it, the shorter it becomes in the hand. This is where the 52 pen is actually about a ½ an inch longer, about 13 millimeters, and therefore fits better unposted than this 94 does. See how it lays down that Desert Varnish ink. So I'm happy with this nib. In fact, I'm very happy with this nib. There's a whole bunch of discussions about between firm and flex. There's semi-flex, semi-soft, however you want to describe it. This kind of, to me, fits into that in-between section. And to me, for your first somewhat flexible nib, this would be a great starter nib, in my humble opinion. Because it's not super soft. You need to give it a little bit of pressure. It does some nice work with this desert varnish ink, which I'm happy about. So I'm not going to rate the pen, but I'm going to rate the nib. And I'm going to give the nib an 8.5. It is smooth. It is soft. And it's just the right wetness, not overly wet. A lot of really soft, flexible nibs lay down a tremendous a lot of ink, which isn't suitable for many papers. And you can see a little bit of feathering here on this Fabriano paper, which I've noticed on occasion, depending upon the ink I'm using, the nib I'm using. And I think there's some inconsistencies in the lay of the paper, so some pieces of the paper seem to feather more than others. I hope you enjoyed this little vintage look. Thank you very much for watching. I just enjoy writing with a pen like this. It's going to be helping me compose a number of letters. Hope this video finds you safe, healthy, and happy, enjoying your pens, whether they be modern, whether they be vintage, or whether they be something in between. Enjoy them. Put ink on paper. We've reached the end of this video, and we're going to say bye. And there'll be a new video soon. See you then.